Hey there. Happy Wednesday. How's everybody doing this week? All right. I hope you're doing well. We are talking about kind of a fun topic, an interesting topic on the Transforming Anxiety podcast this week. And there's a lot of new people here. I know because of the Anxiety Revolution, which launched on Monday. If you haven't registered for that yet, there is still time. There's an announcement bar at the top of the website. Come on over to kellyhanlonmccormick.com and you will see an announcement bar across the top where you can click to register. There is still time. Interviews are live this week. Everything's free this week. So check that out. I have so many new anxious friends, and I'm so excited to get to know all of you. So today we're talking about using anxiety as a buffer. So first of all, let's talk about what buffering is, right? In the world of coaching, well, really in the whole world, we talk about buffering with things. We talk about using activities or using things outside of us so that we don't have to feel how we're feeling. It's a way of escape, right? We use things to buffer from the present moment. We use things to buffer from scary or intense or negative emotions. And when we do that, we're introducing this buffer into our life. We're practicing buffering instead of practicing feeling our feelings, instead of practicing doing something hard or challenging that's in front of us, right? So typical buffers look like things like overspending, right? Have you ever found yourself, you're like, I'm just kind of bored, or I've had a really hard day and I'm stressed. And so you're just scrolling through Amazon Prime like it's social media. Do you ever do this? I catch myself doing this sometimes and I'm like, what am I even looking for? Right? I don't need anything on here and I need to close it down. So that's one buffer, right? Overspending, spending money we don't need to spend. Retail therapy, that whole idea of like, let's just go shop. We'll feel better if we just go shop, right? We tend to spend money we don't need to spend, money that we don't have to spend when we're in a place of buffering by using money as a way to escape how we're feeling or a way to escape what we're perceiving to be a difficult situation or circumstance, right? So overspending is one way. Overeating is another way. Same thing. Have you ever had like a tricky day or come home at the end of the week and you're like, oh, I just deserve to put my face into a pint of Ben and Jerry's? Or you know what sounds amazing is a whole pizza, right? Or mindlessly snacking on things like chips or little snacky foods around the house, right? Little candies or something in order to kind of like it like makes it feel a little better, right? That's the trick with these buffers. It works in the moment. It feels like it's working, right? We get that little hit of dopamine and we're like, "Oh, right? I avoided the pain. I'm seeking pleasure and I'm being efficient," right? This is the motivational triad. That goes back to another podcast episode. We're not going to get into all of that today. But just know that we're coming with this pre-programming where we are seeking pleasure. We're trying to avoid pain. And so a lot of times when you find yourself halfway through a bag of tortilla chips, you have been avoiding some kind of pain and you're seeking pleasure by turning to food, right? So overspending, overeating. Another popular one is over drinking, right? I see this a lot. I see this in my personal life. I hear about this from clients that as we get towards the end of the week, right? Friday nights are notorious for this. There's Friday night happy hour. And the reason that's so popular, the reason that is so successful is because everybody's tapped out, everybody's spent, everybody's stressed, everybody's tired. And alcohol is the perfect way to escape anything that's going on for you. Overspending, overeating, overdrinking. A couple of other examples: overworking, right? We see this happen sometimes if people don't want to come home or if people are lonely or if people are arguing with their spouse or their kids are too much and they find themselves, well, I'll just throw myself into work. I'll just stay at work late, right? It seems noble, that seems effective, and it is kind of effective. It keeps you out of the situation that you're deeming to be challenging, right? Something that appears to be difficult or hard in your life, you're sort of kind of avoiding. You're working your way around that. Now, another one is over-teching. And I use the word over-teching, which is not a word, to describe that particular situation or dynamic when you find yourself zoning out in front of Netflix. Just one more episode, right? Zoning out in front of Netflix, or if you're doing that thing where you're scrolling through social media, it's like something on Instagram is bound to catch my attention. Somebody on Facebook has got to have posted a cute picture of their cat or what they had for dinner or something, right? That's going to distract me from what I'm doing right now. It's going to distract me from the present moment, and that will be helpful. Right? It will feel better because I won't have to feel lonely. I won't have to feel bored. I won't have to feel stressed. I won't have to feel anxious, right? So these are the sorts of buffers that we tend to turn to. And there's lots. This is why I do podcast episodes on some of these things. This is why that holistic pillar of the Transforming Anxiety program is all encompassing with things like sleep and nutrition and the activities and hobbies and stuff that we're looking at. It's why it's so important to look at our relationships. It's why it's so important to be intentional when we approach things like social media or Netflix or alcohol or Amazon Prime, right? So these are kind of the typical buffers. But what we're talking about today is buffering with anxiety. Now, everything that I've mentioned so far as a buffer sounds kind of fun. It sounds kind of relaxing. It sounds kind of tempting. And so you may be thinking, who wants to buffer with anxiety? I'd much rather buffer with ice cream or Doritos or Chardonnay or Stranger Things. Is that what it's called? Stranger Things, right? I think that's what it's called. Those seem more enticing when we're just sitting here talking about it. But what I want to offer you, to go back to the idea of this motivational triad, our brains come with this pre-programming where we are always trying to avoid pain, seek pleasure, and be efficient. And this is the kicker when we start doing something like buffering with anxiety. It's a way of our brains being efficient. Right? So if you've been practicing anxiety, if anxiety, stress, overwhelm, worry, if those are the emotions that you are predominantly feeling, then you have been thinking thoughts that create things like anxiety and stress and overwhelm and worry. And what we're doing, we are practicing. What we're practicing, we're getting better at. And the things that we are good at, we're really efficient with. Right? So think about something like brushing your teeth or driving your car or washing the dishes, right? You're really efficient at those things. You've practiced them. You probably haven't thought about practicing them for a long time. They're so on lock for you. It's so easy. So you don't really have to think about it. And your brain loves that. That's why it's not this big to do to brush your teeth every night. It's not this big ordeal to get in the car and drive somewhere because you know how to do it. You're efficient with it. No problem, right? The same thing happens with our thought patterns. And the same thing, therefore, happens with our feeling patterns. Because when we start thinking a certain brand and flavor of thoughts, we start generating the same kinds of emotions over and over again. And we become very efficient with that. So to get back to the idea of buffering with anxiety, when we're in a circumstance in our life, let's say something happened at work. All right. Your boss said something, it wasn't great. It wasn't supportive. It wasn't good, right? And so now you're feeling frustrated or you're feeling disappointed, right? Something's going on at work that just is not smooth. So now your brain is faced with, do I want to feel the pain of being frustrated? Do I want to feel the pain of being disappointed, right? And your brain's like, no, I don't like pain. I avoid pain, right? However, your brain is also searching for ways it can be efficient. So when you're faced with something like frustration, your brain may reach for anxiety because it's really good at it. It's like, I could be frustrated, or I could do what I've always done. I could do what I always do, which is anxiety. I get anxious. I freak out. I have a meltdown, right? I have to take myself out of the situation because I create this big to do, and I know exactly how that's going to go. I'm super efficient with it, right? So when our brains are faced with this dilemma, it's like there's no real pleasure here to seek out, right? I've got the pain of this frustration, and my only real option here is to be efficient with something. So instead of charting this, new path, this new territory with frustration, which isn't something that I feel regularly, it's not something that's super familiar, it's not something I'm efficient with, they say, wait, I know, let's feel anxious. We're going to do that instead. We're really good at that. Right? So people will come to me, clients will come to me and they're like, I'm freaking out and I have no idea why. I don't know what's going on with me. And I say, well, the emotion is never freaking out, right? That's a cover emotion. That's what shows up. That's what we think is happening. But freaking out isn't ever the real emotion. Get underneath there and figure out what's truly going on. And then people will say, okay, this thing at work happened and it was super disappointing. And I'll say, oh, okay. So what was it like to feel the disappointment? I'll be like, what are you talking about? I didn't feel disappointed. I freaked out. I felt anxious. So instead of allowing yourself to feel disappointed, instead of allowing yourself to process that emotion, you just freaked out instead, right? And people are like, yeah, of course. This is what I always do. And it's just interesting to notice, like, this is a place, this is how we buffer with anxiety. It doesn't seem to make any sense on the surface because nobody would pick anxiety as the buffer, right? It's not pleasurable, it's not tempting, it's not exciting, it doesn't feel good. But if you've become very efficient with anxiety, then it may be something that your brain reaches for when it's faced with two evils and it has to choose the lesser of two, right? It's always going to choose the path of least resistance. And the thing that is a little more familiar, it's like, at least we know how this goes down. If we're disappointed, I have no idea how that ends. I have no idea how that feels. I have no idea where we head with that. But I know how anxiety goes down. So we're going to do this instead, right? So as you're going through the week this week, what I want you to notice is anytime you're feeling that sensation of, okay, now's when I freak out. Now's when I have a meltdown, right? Now's when I just kind of lose it and I feel really anxious. Check in with yourself and see, like, is anxiety truly the emotion? Because most of the time, really, it's not. Most of the time, there's another emotion that your brain perceives to be a little scarier or a little more intense or just straight out unfamiliar. It may be something that it's just like, I don't know how to do that. So instead of figuring out how to do something new, my brain is going to pick something that it knows very well, even if that thing is anxiety. And this is how we really start buffering with anxiety. Does that make sense? This is kind of a mind-bendy, irrational thing to do. It's like nobody would choose it, but our brains are really trying to work to protect us. They're trying to be efficient. They're trying to seek pleasure. They're trying to avoid pain. And sometimes our brains just have to choose the lesser of two evils and go with anxiety because that seems preferable to something bigger and more intense and less familiar. So check in with yourself this week. See if this comes up for you. See if you can find the real emotion that's coming up for you, right? And check in with that emotion. Instead of freaking out, instead of having the meltdown, instead of reaching for anxiety, see, like, what if I were disappointed here? What if I were frustrated here? What if I were angry here, right? What if that were the experience here? And here's what I can promise you. Anytime you fully allow an emotion, it will expire. Emotions don't last forever. They all have a natural shelf life. So if you allow yourself to be frustrated If you allow yourself to be disappointed, that disappointment will ripple through you and then it will dissipate. It will leave and you will be left to see like, okay, what now? That was disappointing, right? The disappointment seemed appropriate for that situation. I didn't like what my boss said. I didn't like how all this went down. Now what? Right? So much more powerful than if you're left with the aftershocks and tremors of a panic attack because you've been reaching for anxiety so that you don't have to feel disappointed. Right? I know this is a hard sell because it's like, oh, instead of feeling anxious, you're going to have another negative emotion to feel. But it will be real. It will be authentic, right? You will be actually doing the work of growth and progress and personal development. You will be facing the real challenge instead of creating another fire for yourself, creating another challenge on top of the challenge. Because here's the deal, that challenge is still going to be waiting for you. Whatever thoughts created the disappointment, whatever circumstances triggered you into feeling frustrated, it's still going to be there. It's not going anywhere just because you freaked out and had a meltdown. That's still going to be there. So why not look at it and say, okay, I'm willing to feel frustrated here. I'm willing to feel disappointed here, or whatever is appropriate. I'm not going to reach for anxiety and distract myself with a meltdown. I'm going to be authentic with myself. I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to see what's real in this moment. Sound good? All right, so those are your marching orders for this week. Check in anytime you feel anxiety and see if there's another more real, more genuine, more true emotion that's coming up for you. And see, just challenge yourself in a really kind and loving and compassionate way. See if you can feel that instead of reaching for anxiety. Think of anxiety like a bag of Doritos. Think of anxiety like watching Netflix on repeat, right? You can put that down just as easily as you can put down the other things. It's just a matter of training your mind to do it. Cool? All right. Come on over to the website. You can find this episode of the podcast. This is episode number 30 of the Transforming Anxiety podcast. You can find it on the website, kellyhanlonmccormick.com/podcast/30. You can also find it on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever you love to listen to podcasts. So have a great rest of the week. Have an amazing Labor Day weekend. Can you believe that's already coming up? Have a great long weekend, and I will see you same time, same place next week. All right. Take care, guys. Bye for now.